She woke up in a stranger's bed, then froze when he walked into her office as her new boss. "Hi, my beautiful family. It's me, Mr. Peter. Today I welcome you back. Not with my voice, but with my heart. Yes, I'm unwell. I won't lie to you. My body is weak, but my soul is still writing for you. Every word, every scene, every heartbeat of these stories still comes from me. For now, my dear brother James is narrating, but the pen is still in my hand. But family, something is hurting me deeper than this illness. My competitors are reporting my channel. I've received a warning email. They want me gone. But what truly breaks me is the silence from the very people I love the most. You, my family. I'm not here to beg. I'm just here to say, if these stories have ever made you feel seen, if they've ever made you cry or believe in love again, then please show your support. Like this video. Comment something beautiful. Let them know Mr. Peter is not alone, because this is not just a YouTube channel. This is our family, and right now, I need you more than ever. Let's rise together. Let your love be louder than their hate. And until I return, stronger and healed, let my brother James carry my voice. Now, take a deep breath, open your heart, and let the story begin.
Sunlight spilled like liquid gold through floor-to-ceiling windows, warming Stella Morris's face as consciousness drifted back like a reluctant tide. The silk sheets beneath her fingertips whispered secrets of luxury she'd never known, too smooth, too perfect, too expensive to belong to her world. Her eyes opened to unfamiliar territory, and her heart thundered against her ribs. This wasn't her cozy apartment with its sunny yellow walls and lovingly collected vintage furniture. This was a penthouse that could grace the covers of architectural magazines, all sculptural lines, designer pieces, and windows that framed the city like a living painting. The bed embracing her was vast enough for a small family, wrapped in charcoal linens that probably carried a price tag exceeding her monthly rent. Terror closed her throat as fragmented memories from the previous night danced just beyond her grasp. Maya's bachelorette celebration, the exclusive nightclub with its hypnotic music and crystal cocktails, dancing until her borrowed heels became instruments of torture, and then emptiness, a void where crucial memories should reside. Stella's breath hitched as she discovered herself still wearing her midnight black cocktail dress, though it had twisted around her body like a silk tornado. Her strappy heels lay defeated on the marble floor beside the bed. Relief flooded through her. She remained fully clothed, but mortification still burned through her bloodstream like molten metal. The sound of running water from what she assumed was an attached bathroom made her freeze. Someone else was here, someone who owned this palace of glass and steel. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. The bathroom door opened and steam billowed out like morning mist. Through it emerged a man who seemed to have stepped from the pages of a magazine himself. Tall and lean, with dark hair still damp from his shower, he wore a simple white t-shirt and dark jeans that somehow looked designer on his frame. When their eyes met, his expression shifted from casual morning routine to genuine concern. "You're awake," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that contradicted the awkwardness of the situation. "How are you feeling?" Stella sat up quickly, immediately regretting the sudden movement as her head spun. Where am I? Who are you? What happened last night?" The questions tumbled out in a rush, her voice hoarse and unfamiliar to her own ears. The man raised his hands in a peaceful gesture, staying near the bathroom door to give her space. "I'm Albert Lorenzo. You're in my apartment. And before you panic, I want you to know that nothing happened between us. Nothing at all." "Nothing happened?" Stella's voice cracked with disbelief. "Then why am I in your bed? Why can't I remember anything?" Albert moved slowly to a chair across the room, maintaining distance between them. His movements were careful, respectful, and somehow that made her feel both safer and more confused. Your friend Maya was worried about you. You'd had quite a bit to drink and you weren't feeling well. When she couldn't reach your roommate and you couldn't remember your address clearly, she asked if I could help. The kindness in his eyes was genuine, Stella realized, though the situation remained surreal. You're saying you… what? Rescued me? I wouldn't call it a rescue, Albert said with a gentle smile. Maya is actually a friend of my sister's. She knew I lived nearby and that I don't drink much. When you started feeling sick, she was worried about getting you home safely. She asked if I could help, and of course I said yes. Stella's memories began trickling back in fragments. Maya mentioning someone's brother who might give them a ride, the nauseating feeling in her stomach as the room spun. Someone's strong arms supporting her, a voice telling her everything would be okay. You brought me here and put me in your bed. The question came out more accusatory than she intended. Albert shook his head quickly. I brought you here because it was the closest safe place, and you were really not well. But I slept in the guest room. I wanted to make sure you were okay throughout the night. You were pretty sick for a while there. I checked on you a few times, but I would never take advantage of someone in your condition. Or any condition, for that matter. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, and Stella felt her panic beginning to subside, replaced by a different kind of mortification. Oh God, did I throw up? A gentle laugh escaped Albert's lips. You did, but don't worry about it. I've seen worse at college parties, trust me. I made sure you had water, got you some aspirin, and stayed nearby in case you needed anything. You mumbled a lot about missing some important meeting on Monday, so I figured you'd want to be somewhere safe to sleep it off. Monday. The word hit her like a lightning bolt. What time is it? What day is it? It's Sunday morning, about 9:30. You've got plenty of time to prepare for whatever that important Monday meeting is. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by embarrassment so acute it made her want to disappear into the expensive mattress. This beautiful, kind stranger had spent his Saturday night taking care of a drunk woman he didn't even know, and she'd repaid him by basically accusing him of assault. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice thick with shame. I can't believe Maya must have been so worried, and you didn't have to do any of this. I'm mortified. Albert leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. Hey, don't be sorry. We've all been there. Well, maybe not exactly there, but you know what I mean. Maya was just being a good friend, and I was just being a decent human being. That's what people should do for each other. Stella studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or hidden motives, but found only warmth and honesty. He was genuinely one of those rare people who helped others without expecting anything in return. The realization made her feel even worse about her initial suspicions. I should go, she said, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. I've already imposed enough, and I'm sure you have things to do on your Sunday. Actually, Albert said, standing as well, Maya left your purse and keys with me, but she took your phone to call your roommate and let her know you were safe. She said she'd bring it back this morning, but she hasn't arrived yet. Would you like some coffee while we wait? Or breakfast? You should probably eat something. The mention of food made Stella's stomach growl audibly, causing both of them to smile. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten, and her body was clearly demanding fuel. I don't want to be any more trouble, she said hesitantly. It's no trouble at all. I was going to make breakfast anyway. I make excellent French toast if you're interested. Something about the way he said it, casual, friendly, without any undertones or expectations, made her nod before she could overthink it. That actually sounds wonderful. As Albert headed toward what she assumed was the kitchen, Stella caught her reflection in the mirrored closet doors and winced. Her dark hair was a tangled mess, her makeup smudged, and her dress looked like she'd slept in it, which she supposed she had. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd had too much to drink and spent the night in a stranger's bed. But as she heard Albert humming softly in the kitchen, the sound of coffee brewing and pans clattering gently, she realized that despite the mortifying circumstances, she felt safe here. This beautiful stranger, Albert Lorenzo, had shown her kindness when she was vulnerable, and that wasn't something she encountered often in her experience. Looking out at the city spreading below his windows, Stella couldn't shake the feeling that this morning, this encounter, would somehow be important. She didn't know how or why, but something told her that Albert Lorenzo wasn't going to be just an embarrassing story she'd eventually laugh about with Maya. Something told her this was just the beginning. Chapter 2. The Shocking Revelation. Monday morning arrived with the promise of new beginnings. Stella stood before her bathroom mirror, applying the final touches of her makeup with the precision of someone who understood the importance of first impressions. Today was the day she'd been working toward for months, her first day as Senior Marketing Director at Lorenzo Enterprises, one of the most prestigious companies in the city. Her reflection showed a woman transformed from the disheveled mess of Sunday morning. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek bun that showcased her elegant neck, and her navy blue power suit fit her curves perfectly while maintaining complete professionalism. The silver jewelry she'd chosen was understated but confident, and her makeup highlighted her natural beauty without being overdone. "You've got this, Stella Morris," she whispered to her reflection, adjusting the lapels of her blazer. "You earned this position. You belong here." The weekend's embarrassing encounter with Albert Lorenzo had been pushed firmly to the back of her mind. After Maya had retrieved her phone and they'd shared that surprisingly comfortable breakfast, Stella had managed to escape Albert's penthouse with her dignity somewhat intact. He'd been a perfect gentleman throughout their entire interaction, even walking her down to ensure she got safely into her rideshare. She'd spent the rest of Sunday preparing for this moment, reviewing her portfolio, rehearsing her introduction, and mentally cataloging all the innovative campaigns she planned to propose. This job represented everything she'd worked for: the chance to lead a major marketing department, the salary that would finally allow her to move out of her cramped shared apartment, and the professional recognition she craved. Lorenzo Enterprises occupied an entire gleaming tower in the heart of the business district. As Stella's heels clicked confidently across the marble lobby, she felt a surge of pride. The security guard directed her to the executive floor, where she was greeted by a woman with silver hair and kind eyes. "You must be Stella Morris," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Margaret Powell, Mr. Lorenzo's executive assistant. We're so excited to have you join our team." "Thank you, Mrs. Powell. I'm thrilled to be here," Stella replied, her voice steady and professional, despite the butterflies dancing in her stomach. Margaret led her through a maze of modern offices and conference rooms, each more impressive than the last. The entire floor radiated success and sophistication, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the city. Employees they passed looked polished and purposeful, and Stella felt herself standing a little straighter, matching their energy. "Mr. Lorenzo likes to personally welcome all new senior staff members," Margaret explained as they approached a set of imposing double doors made of dark wood and frosted glass. "He's quite hands-on with the important hires, which shows how much faith he has in your potential." Stella's heart rate quickened with anticipation. She'd researched the company extensively, but had never seen a clear photo of the CEO. She knew he was young for such a position, having inherited the company from his father and transformed it into an industry leader through innovation and strategic thinking. This meeting would set the tone for her entire tenure at the company. Margaret knocked gently on the door, then opened it with a flourish. "Mr. Lorenzo, I'd like you to meet our new Senior Marketing Director, Stella Morris." The words that followed seemed to happen in slow motion. Stella stepped confidently into the office, her professional smile perfectly in place, her hand extended for a firm handshake. Her eyes traveled upward from the polished mahogany desk to the man rising from behind it, and her entire world came to a screeching halt. Albert Lorenzo, the same Albert Lorenzo who had rescued her from Maya's bachelorette party, the same Albert Lorenzo whose bed she had woken up in just 48 hours ago. The same Albert Lorenzo who had made her French toast and coffee while she wore yesterday's wrinkled dress and mascara-smudged makeup. The professional smile froze on her face as recognition dawned in his eyes as well. For a moment that felt like an eternity, they simply stared at each other across the expanse of his office. Margaret continued speaking, something about Stella's impressive portfolio and innovative campaign strategies, but her words sounded like they were coming from underwater. Albert recovered first, his expression shifting smoothly into professional neutrality, though Stella caught the flash of surprise that had initially crossed his features. He stepped around his desk with the same measured grace she remembered from Sunday morning. "Miss Morris," he said, his voice carefully modulated, extending his hand toward her. "Welcome to Lorenzo Enterprises. I've been looking forward to meeting you." The word meeting hung in the air between them like a shared secret. Stella forced herself back into motion, accepting his handshake with what she hoped appeared to be professional composure. His hand was warm and steady, and she tried not to think about how those same hands had gently helped her when she was sick, bringing her water and making sure she was comfortable. "Mr. Lorenzo," she managed, proud that her voice came out steady. "Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to contribute to the company's continued success." Margaret beamed at both of them, clearly pleased with what she perceived as an immediate rapport between the new hire and the CEO. "I'll leave you two to discuss Stella's integration into the team. Mr. Lorenzo, shall I reschedule your 10 o'clock, or will this be brief?" "Please reschedule it," Albert said, never taking his eyes off Stella. "I'd like to give Ms. Morris my full attention this morning." After Margaret closed the door behind her, silence settled over the office like a heavy blanket. Stella remained frozen in place, her mind racing through 1,000 implications, while her body remained perfectly still. This couldn't be happening. This absolutely could not be happening. Albert moved to the window, putting distance between them, and Stella noticed that he seemed as shaken as she felt, despite his professional exterior. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and careful. "I had no idea," he said simply. "When we met on Saturday night, I had no idea you were Stella Morris, the marketing director we'd hired. Your portfolio never included a photo, and Maya never mentioned your last name." Stella found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. "I didn't know Lorenzo Enterprises was your company. Maya just said her friend's brother might help us get home safely. She never mentioned that I was the CEO of the company you'd be starting at on Monday," Albert finished. "This is—" He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect styling. "This is incredibly awkward." The word awkward didn't begin to cover it. Stella's mind was spinning with worst-case scenarios. Would he think she'd somehow orchestrated this? Would he question her qualifications? Would he assume she'd slept her way into the position, even though nothing had happened between them? "Mr. Lorenzo," she began, then stopped, unsure how to proceed. The formal address felt strange after their informal breakfast conversation, but anything else seemed inappropriate given their current circumstances. "Albert," he corrected gently. "We're going to be working closely together, and I think we've moved past strict formalities, don't you think?" His attempt at lightness helped ease some of the tension in her shoulders, but Stella remained on guard. "Albert, I want you to know that I had absolutely no idea about any of this. I would never— I earned this position on my own merit." "I know that," Albert said firmly, turning to face her fully. "Your portfolio spoke for itself. Your innovative campaigns for Peterson and Associates and the Turner Group were brilliant. Your strategic thinking and creative execution were exactly what we were looking for. This situation, whatever it is, doesn't change the fact that you're the best candidate we interviewed." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by a new wave of anxiety. But what about the other employees? What if someone finds out about Saturday night? What if they think, "They won't find out unless we tell them," Albert said, his voice steady and reassuring. "And there's nothing to find out, really. Nothing inappropriate happened. You needed help, I provided it. End of story." Stella looked around his office, taking in the awards on the walls, the photos of successful company ventures, the evidence of Albert's professional accomplishments. This was her boss. This successful, attractive, kind man, who had seen her at her absolute worst, was now the person who would determine her professional future. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, the admission escaping before she could stop it. Albert's expression softened. "Can I tell you something? I hired Stella Morris, the brilliant marketing strategist who revolutionized customer engagement for 3 major companies. That's who I need on my team. What happened this weekend doesn't change who you are professionally." His words were exactly what she needed to hear, and she felt her confidence beginning to return. She was good at her job, exceptional even. She had worked too hard and come too far to let an embarrassing personal situation derail her career. "You're right," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I'm here to do a job, and I intend to do it well." Albert smiled, and for a moment she caught a glimpse of the kind man who had taken care of her when she was vulnerable. "I have no doubt you will. Shall we start over?" He extended his hand again, this time with a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'm Albert Lorenzo, CEO of Lorenzo Enterprises. Welcome to the team, Miss Morris." Stella accepted his handshake, feeling her professional confidence returning in full force. "Thank you, Mr. Lorenzo. I'm looking forward to making great things happen here." As their hands parted, both of them seemed to realize simultaneously that despite their best intentions, nothing about their working relationship was going to be simple. Chapter 3. The Power Play. The following 2 weeks at Lorenzo Enterprises passed in a blur of strategic meetings, campaign presentations, and the delicate dance of establishing herself as a formidable force in the marketing department. Stella threw herself into the work with an intensity that impressed even her most skeptical colleagues. She analyzed market trends until her eyes burned, crafted campaigns that made seasoned executives nod in approval, and transformed the department's approach to client engagement. Albert maintained perfect professionalism throughout their interactions, treating her with the same respect and consideration he showed all senior staff. During meetings, he listened intently to her insights, challenged her ideas in ways that made them stronger, and consistently credited her contributions in front of the board. If anyone had observed their working relationship, they would have seen nothing but mutual professional respect. Yet, beneath the surface, Stella felt the constant undercurrent of their shared secret. Every time Albert handed her a document, their fingers would brush, and she'd remember his gentle care when she'd been sick. When he smiled at her suggestions during presentations, she'd catch glimpses of the warmth he'd shown her over French toast in his kitchen. The memories created a tension that was both uncomfortable and oddly thrilling. Stella had just finished presenting her revolutionary social media campaign to the board when she overheard the conversation that would change everything. She was gathering her materials in the conference room when voices from the hallway drifted through the partially open door. "I'm telling you, Benjamin, something's not right about Lorenzo's new hire," came a woman's voice that Stella recognized as Patricia from accounting. "Nobody gets promoted to senior marketing director that fast unless there's something else going on." "What do you mean?" The male voice belonged to Dominic Ashworth, Albert's longtime business rival and board member. Stella had met him briefly, a man in his 50s with Arctic eyes and a smile that never touched them. Think about it, Patricia continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Lorenzo interviews dozens of candidates, then suddenly hires this woman nobody's ever heard of. And have you seen how he looks at her during meetings? There's definitely something personal going on there. Stella felt ice crystallize in her veins. She remained perfectly still, barely breathing as the conversation continued. You think Lorenzo's sleeping with her? Dominic asked, and Stella could hear the predatory amusement in his voice. I think Albert Lorenzo isn't as squeaky clean as everyone believes, Patricia replied. And I think Miss Morris got this job because she's warming his bed, not because she's qualified for it. Fascinating, Dominic mused. Very fascinating indeed. You know, I've been searching for leverage to use against Lorenzo in the Ashworth merger negotiations. This could be exactly what I need. Stella's hands trembled as she processed what she was hearing. They were talking about her as if she were nothing more than a corporate scandal waiting to happen. Worse, Benjamin was planning to use these fabricated rumors to damage Albert's reputation and business dealings. What are you going to do? Patricia asked. I'm going to ensure the right people hear about Lorenzo's unprofessional hiring practices, Dominic said with satisfaction. The board takes ethics violations very seriously, especially when they involve executive misconduct. This could be the ammunition I need to finally bring Albert Lorenzo to his knees. Their footsteps faded down the hallway, leaving Stella alone with her racing heart and growing fury. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, and proven herself too many times to have her reputation destroyed by malicious gossip. But what made her truly angry was the realization that Albert's reputation was about to be destroyed because of her presence in his company. The unfairness of it all made her hands clench into fists. Albert had been nothing but kind to her, both personally and professionally. He had rescued her from a humiliating situation, treated her with respect, and hired her based on her qualifications. Now he was going to pay for that kindness with his reputation and possibly his business. That afternoon, Stella requested a meeting with Albert to discuss the upcoming Ashworth merger. As she sat across from him in his office, she studied his face, looking for any sign that he'd heard the rumors. His expression remained professionally neutral, but she noticed the slight tension around his eyes that hadn't been there before. The Ashworth merger is crucial for our expansion into the European market, Albert was saying, spreading documents across his desk. If we can successfully acquire their distribution network, we'll be positioned to dominate the international market within 2 years. Stella nodded, forcing herself to focus on the business at hand while her mind raced with other concerns. What's your biggest concern about the deal? Dominic Ashworth, Albert admitted with a slight frown. He's been pushing for this merger for months, but I suspect he has ulterior motives. He's been trying to gain more influence over Lorenzo Enterprises for years, and this merger would give him significant leverage. Do you trust him? Stella asked carefully. Albert's laugh was humorless. I don't trust Dominic Ashworth as far as I can throw him, but the deal is too important to let personal feelings interfere. Sometimes you have to work with people you don't like to achieve your goals. Stella felt her heart sink. Albert had no idea that Dominic was already working against him, using her as ammunition. She wanted to warn him, but how could she explain that she'd overheard people discussing their supposed affair without admitting that rumors were spreading about them? Albert, she began hesitantly, have you heard any talk around the office about my hiring? His expression immediately became guarded. What kind of talk? People questioning my qualifications, wondering why I was hired so quickly. She couldn't bring herself to mention the more personal implications. Albert's jaw tightened. Let me be clear about something, Stella. I hired you because you're brilliant, not because of any other reason. Anyone who suggests otherwise is either ignorant or malicious. But what if people don't see it that way? What if they think? She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. What if they think I hired you because of what happened that Saturday night? Albert's voice was quiet but intense. Is that what you're worried about? Stella nodded, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Albert leaned forward, his eyes fierce with conviction. Then those people are wrong, and they can deal with the consequences of their assumptions. I won't let office gossip dictate how I run my company or whom I hire. His words should have been reassuring, but Stella could see the strain in his expression. The rumors were already affecting him, whether he wanted to admit it or not. She realized with growing certainty that Albert's protective instincts would prevent him from publicly defending her in the way that might actually stop the gossip. He would try to handle it quietly, diplomatically, which would only make things worse. As she left his office that afternoon, Stella made a decision that would change everything. If Albert wouldn't protect himself from Dominic Ashworth's machinations, then she would have to do it herself. And if Dominic wanted to use her as a weapon against Albert, then she would show him exactly how dangerous that weapon could be. That evening, Stella sat in her apartment with her laptop, researching everything she could find about the Ashworth merger. If Dominic thought he could destroy Albert's reputation and business through gossip and innuendo, he was about to learn that Stella Morris was not the helpless victim he assumed her to be. She was a strategic mastermind who had built her career on understanding human psychology and market manipulation. She had the skills to destroy reputations, dismantle business deals, and turn public opinion on its head. She had simply never chosen to use those skills for destructive purposes. Until now, Dominic Ashworth wanted to play dirty. Fine. Stella would show him exactly what dirty looked like when executed by someone who understood the art of destruction far better than he ever could. As she began crafting her strategy, Stella felt a dark satisfaction settling over her. Albert had been kind to her, had treated her with respect and dignity when she was vulnerable. Dominic had chosen to attack that kindness, to use her as a weapon against the man who had protected her. That had been Dominic's first mistake. His second mistake was assuming that Stella Morris was just another pretty face who had slept her way to the top. By the time she was finished with him, Dominic Ashworth would understand exactly who he had chosen to cross, and Albert Lorenzo would be free from the threat that Dominic posed to his business and reputation. The irony wasn't lost on her that in order to protect Albert from the consequences of their weekend encounter, she would have to become the very thing the rumors accused her of being, a woman who used her intelligence and ruthless ambition to destroy powerful men. But if that's what it took to save Albert from Dominic's schemes, then that's exactly what she would become. The war had begun, and Stella Morris intended to win. Chapter 4. The Perfect Revenge. 3 weeks into her employment at Lorenzo Enterprises, Stella Morris had undergone a complete metamorphosis. By day, she remained the consummate professional, attending meetings, presenting strategies, and earning the grudging respect of her colleagues through sheer brilliance. But by night, she transformed into something far more dangerous. A strategic mastermind orchestrating the downfall of Dominic Ashworth. Her apartment had become a command center. The dining table disappeared beneath financial reports, competitor analyses, and detailed timelines of the Ashworth merger negotiations. Her laptop screen glowed well into the early morning hours as she researched, planned, and prepared for a campaign that would make her previous marketing successes look like amateur hour. The elegance of her plan lay in its surgical precision. She wouldn't need to fabricate evidence or spread false rumors. Dominic Ashworth had provided her with everything she needed through his own arrogance and unethical business practices. All Stella had to do was expose the truth in the most devastating way possible. She began with the simplest move in her arsenal, intelligence gathering. During her regular marketing analysis meetings, she requested access to competitor research files, merger documentation, and financial projections. Her position as senior marketing director provided the perfect cover for her requests, and Albert readily approved her access, impressed by her thoroughness in understanding the company's strategic position. I want to ensure our marketing campaigns align perfectly with the merger timeline, she had explained to Albert, her expression earnest and professional. Understanding Ashworth Corp's market position will help me craft messaging that highlights the synergies we'll create. Albert's smile had been genuine and approving. Your attention to detail continues to impress me, Stella. That kind of strategic thinking is exactly why you're perfect for this role. The praise should have made her feel guilty about her deception, but instead it strengthened her resolve. Albert's faith in her abilities only reinforced how wrong Dominic's accusations were and how important it was to protect Albert from further attacks. Within a week, Stella had compiled a comprehensive dossier on Ashworth Corp that would have impressed a seasoned corporate spy. She knew about their declining European market share, their cash flow problems, and most importantly, their desperate need for Lorenzo Enterprises' resources to avoid bankruptcy within the next 18 months. But the real treasure came when she discovered Dominic Ashworth's personal financial troubles. Hidden beneath layers of shell companies and creative accounting, Dominic had been borrowing against Ashworth Corp's assets to fund his gambling addiction and lavish lifestyle. The merger wasn't just a business opportunity for him, it was a lifeline that would allow him to access Lorenzo Enterprises' cash reserves and cover his mounting personal debts. Stella smiled as she reviewed the evidence she'd uncovered. Dominic thought he was manipulating Albert into a merger that would give him control over Lorenzo Enterprises. In reality, he was a desperate man trying to save himself from financial ruin, and he was willing to destroy Albert's reputation to achieve his goals. The second phase of her plan required more delicate maneuvering. Stella began strategically leaking information to Ashworth Corp's competitors, framing it as market research that Lorenzo Enterprises was conducting publicly. She crafted anonymous tips to financial journalists about Ashworth Corp's unstable position, providing just enough detail to raise questions without revealing her sources. Her years of understanding consumer psychology and market manipulation served her perfectly. She knew exactly how to plant seeds of doubt that would grow into full-blown concerns about Ashworth Corp's viability. Within days, whispers began circulating through the financial community about potential red flags in the company's recent filings. The third phase was the most sophisticated, turning Dominic's own tactics against him. Stella created a network of false personas on professional networking sites, each designed to seem like concerned industry insiders sharing observations about the Lorenzo Ashworth merger. These fictional consultants and analysts began posting carefully crafted questions about the deal's wisdom, highlighting the exact concerns that would most worry Lorenzo Enterprises' board members. She timed each revelation perfectly, building momentum like a master conductor orchestrating a symphony of destruction. Every piece of information she released was factual and verifiable, which made her campaign impossible to dismiss as mere rumor-mongering. She wasn't creating scandals. She was simply ensuring that existing scandals received the attention they deserved. Albert began showing signs of strain as questions about the merger mounted. During their daily briefings, Stella watched him field increasingly concerned calls from board members and financial advisors. His jaw would tighten as he listened to reports about Ashworth Corp's declining stock price and the growing media attention surrounding Dominic's business practices. "I don't understand how this information is getting out," Albert confided to Stella one afternoon, running his hands through his hair in frustration. The due diligence reports were supposed to be confidential. Now, every financial blogger in the city is speculating about Ashworth's stability. Stella maintained her expression of professional concern while internally marveling at the effectiveness of her campaign. Maybe it's better that these issues are coming to light now before the merger is finalized, she suggested carefully. If there are real problems with Ashworth Corp, wouldn't you want to know about them? Albert nodded grimly. You're right, of course, but the timing is suspicious. Someone is definitely working against this deal, and I suspect it's one of our competitors trying to prevent us from expanding into the European market. If only he knew, Stella thought, that the person working against the deal was sitting across from him, motivated not by corporate rivalry, but by the desire to protect him from Dominic's manipulation. The fourth phase required Stella to take a more direct approach. She began attending the same networking events and industry conferences that Dominic frequented, always staying in the background but carefully positioning herself to overhear his conversations. What she learned during these reconnaissance missions exceeded her wildest expectations. Dominic was indeed spreading rumors about her relationship with Albert, but he was also sharing confidential details about Lorenzo Enterprises' strategic plans with his gambling associates, hoping to gain insider trading advantages. His desperation had made him reckless, and his recklessness had made him vulnerable. Stella documented everything: dates, locations, witnesses, and the specific information Dominic had disclosed. She cross-referenced his gambling debts with the timeline of his confidential disclosures, building an airtight case for securities fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The final phase of her plan was the most dangerous because it required her to personally interact with Dominic. At a charity gala that both Lorenzo Enterprises and Ashworth Corp were sponsoring, Stella approached Dominic with a strategy that would have made Machiavelli proud. "Mr. Ashworth," she said, appearing at his elbow while he nursed his third whiskey of the evening, "I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Stella Morris, Lorenzo Enterprises' new senior marketing director." Dominic turned to study her with the calculating gaze of a predator evaluating potential prey. "Ah, yes. Albert's new acquisition." His tone made it clear that he wasn't referring to her professional skills. Stella smiled sweetly, though her eyes remained glacial. "I prefer to think of myself as Albert's secret weapon. You'd be amazed at what I can accomplish when properly motivated." "Is that so?" Dominic's interest was clearly piqued, and Stella could see him wondering if she might be useful in his schemes against Albert. "Oh, yes," Stella continued, moving closer and lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "For instance, I've become quite adept at gathering information that others might prefer to keep private. Market intelligence, personal financial details, private conversations. You'd be surprised what people reveal when they think no one important is listening." Dominic's expression shifted from predatory interest to wary concern. "What are you suggesting, Miss Morris?" Stella's smile widened, becoming genuinely predatory now. "I'm suggesting that you might want to be more careful about the conversations you have in public places, especially when they involve confidential business information or personal financial troubles. You never know who might be paying attention." She walked away before Dominic could respond, leaving him standing alone with his whiskey and the sudden realization that his carefully laid plans might not be as secret as he'd believed. By the end of that evening, Stella had planted the seeds of paranoia that would consume Dominic over the following weeks. He would spend his time looking over his shoulder, wondering what she knew and who else might be watching him, instead of focusing on his campaign against Albert. As Stella reviewed her progress that night, she felt a satisfaction unlike anything she'd ever experienced in her legitimate marketing career. Every move had been calculated, every revelation perfectly timed, every psychological manipulation expertly executed. She had taken Dominic's own weapons, gossip, innuendo, and financial pressure, and turned them against him with surgical precision. The Ashworth merger was already beginning to crumble under the weight of the scrutiny she had orchestrated. Dominic's reputation in the financial community was unraveling as his past indiscretions came to light, and Albert remained completely unaware that his salvation was being orchestrated by the woman he had rescued from an embarrassing situation just a month ago. Soon, Dominic Ashworth would learn the price of underestimating Stella Morris, and Albert Lorenzo would be free from the threat that Dominic posed, even if he never knew how close he had come to losing everything. The war was nearly won, and Stella had achieved victory without Albert ever knowing a battle was being fought. Chapter 5. The Truth Unveiled. The morning that would shatter everything began like any other. Stella arrived at Lorenzo Enterprises with her usual confidence, carrying her briefcase and the satisfaction of knowing that Dominic Ashworth's world was continuing its carefully orchestrated collapse. Financial reporters had begun asking pointed questions about Ashworth Corp's stability, and 3 potential investors had already withdrawn from preliminary discussions about the merger. She was reviewing the latest market reports when Margaret Powell appeared at her office door, looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Miss Morris, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Margaret's usual composed demeanor seemed shaken, her kind eyes filled with concern. "Of course, Margaret. Please come in and close the door." Stella gestured to the chair across from her desk, immediately sensing that whatever Margaret needed to discuss was serious. Margaret sat down heavily, wringing her hands in a gesture that was completely unlike her normally poised behavior. "I don't quite know how to begin this conversation, dear. It's about something I overheard yesterday, and I feel I must tell someone, but I'm not sure if it's my place." Stella leaned forward, her attention fully focused. "What did you overhear, Margaret?" "It was Dominic Ashworth," Margaret said, her voice dropping to a whisper despite the closed door. "He was on a phone call in the conference room yesterday afternoon, and I was bringing him some documents when I heard him talking about you and Mr. Lorenzo." Stella's blood ran cold. "What was he saying?" Margaret's expression was pained. "He was bragging to someone about how he'd been spreading rumors about your relationship with Mr. Lorenzo. He said he'd convinced Patricia from accounting to help him spread gossip about how you got your position, and that it was working perfectly to damage Mr. Lorenzo's reputation with the board." The words hit Stella like physical blows. She had been so focused on her revenge campaign that she hadn't fully processed the implications of what she'd overheard weeks ago. Dominic hadn't just been discussing existing rumors. He had been actively creating them. "There's more," Margaret continued, her voice thick with emotion. "He said that Mr. Lorenzo had been selected for some kind of investigation by the board, something about ethical violations in hiring practices." Dominic was laughing about it, saying that by the time he was finished, Albert would be so distracted by the scandal that he wouldn't notice Ashworth Corp's real financial problems until it was too late to back out of the merger. Stella felt the world tilting around her. "Margaret, are you absolutely certain about what you heard?" "I'm positive, dear, and there's something else you need to know." Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a manila folder. "After I heard that conversation, I did something I've never done in 30 years of working here. I went through Dominic's files when he left the office." She handed Stella the folder with trembling hands. "These are copies of emails between Dominic and Patricia, and between Dominic and several board members. The whole thing was planned, Stella. Dominic orchestrated the rumors about you and Mr. Lorenzo to create exactly the scandal he needed to pressure Albert into the merger." Stella opened the folder with shaking hands, her eyes scanning the damning evidence. Email after email detailed Dominic's manipulation, how he'd approached Patricia with his suspicions about Albert's inappropriate relationship with his new hire, how he'd suggested that concerned employees should voice their worries to board members, how he'd carefully planted seeds of doubt about Albert's judgment and professionalism. But the worst revelation came in an email Dominic had sent to his lawyer. "The Lorenzo situation is proceeding flawlessly. By the time the board finishes their ethics investigation, Albert will be so desperate to restore his reputation that he'll agree to any merger terms I propose. The Morris woman was the perfect catalyst, attractive enough to make the affair believable, new enough that no one questions her qualifications, and obviously smitten with Lorenzo during meetings. The board is already asking questions about favoritism and inappropriate workplace relationships. Stella's hands were shaking so violently that she could barely hold the pages. Everything she thought she knew had been wrong. Albert hadn't been protecting the company's reputation by staying silent about the rumors. He'd been protecting her. The investigation Margaret mentioned meant that Albert was facing serious professional consequences for something that had never happened. "Oh, God," she whispered, the full weight of her mistake crashing over her. "Margaret, does Albert know about the board investigation?" Margaret nodded sadly. "He's been meeting with investigators for the past week. He thinks he's been keeping it quiet to protect you from any embarrassment, but the whole senior staff knows something is happening. There are rumors that he might be forced to resign if the board determines that his judgment has been compromised." Stella felt physically ill. While she had been orchestrating Dominic's downfall, Albert had been suffering the consequences of Dominic's lies in silence, trying to shield her from the scandal. Her brilliant revenge plan had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of who was actually innocent and who was guilty. "There's one more thing," Margaret said quietly. "I found this in the files as well." She handed Stella another document, a copy of Albert's hiring recommendation for Stella, dated 3 weeks before Maya's bachelorette party. Stella read Albert's words with growing emotion. "Stella Morris represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking our marketing department needs. Her portfolio demonstrates not only creative excellence, but strategic depth that will be invaluable as we expand into new markets. Her campaign for the Turner Group shows an understanding of consumer psychology that is rare in professionals at any level. I recommend we make her an offer immediately, before our competitors recognize her potential." The date stamp on the document was irrefutable proof that Albert's interest in hiring her had nothing to do with their weekend encounter. He had chosen her based purely on her professional merits, exactly as he had claimed. "Margaret," Stella said, her voice hoarse with emotion, "how long have you known about this?" "I suspected Dominic was behind the rumors from the beginning," Margaret replied. "But I only found the proof yesterday. I've watched that man try to undermine Mr. Lorenzo for years, but this time he went too far. I won't stand by and watch him destroy a good man's reputation with lies." Stella closed her eyes, feeling the full weight of her catastrophic error. She had waged war against Dominic Ashworth, but she had based that war on the assumption that Albert was the target of unfair attacks. In reality, Albert was not only the target, he was the victim, suffering real consequences while she played elaborate games of corporate espionage. "Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. How serious is this board investigation? What kind of consequences could Albert face?" Margaret's expression was grave. "The board takes ethics violations very seriously, especially anything involving executive misconduct. If they determine that Albert showed favoritism in hiring you, or if they believe there's any truth to the rumors about an inappropriate relationship, he could face suspension, demotion, or even termination. The Lorenzo family has owned this company for generations, but the board has the power to remove anyone, even Albert." The irony was almost unbearable. Stella's campaign against Dominic had been devastatingly effective. His financial problems were now public knowledge, his credibility was in ruins, and the Ashworth merger was on the verge of collapse. But while she had been destroying Dominic, he had been successfully destroying Albert through the very rumors that had motivated her revenge in the first place. "There's something else I need to tell you," Stella said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something about that weekend Dominic is using against Albert." Margaret leaned forward, her expression encouraging Stella to continue. Nothing happened between Albert and me that night, Stella said firmly. Nothing inappropriate, nothing unprofessional, nothing that would justify any of these accusations. Albert was a perfect gentleman who helped someone in need, and now he's being punished for his kindness. Margaret's smile was sad but knowing. I never doubted that for a moment, dear. I've worked with Albert Lorenzo for 15 years, and I've never seen him conduct himself with anything less than complete integrity. The man who stayed at the office until midnight, helping me prepare my daughter's college applications, is not the kind of person who would take advantage of someone in a vulnerable position. The weight of Albert's character, combined with the evidence of Dominic's manipulation, created a crushing sense of urgency in Stella's chest. She had to fix this. She had to find a way to undo the damage that Dominic had caused to Albert's reputation and career. But first, she had to face the horrible truth about her own actions. While she had been playing strategic games and feeling satisfied about her clever manipulations, Albert had been fighting for his professional life. He had been enduring an ethics investigation, facing potential career destruction, and dealing with the stress of seeing his family's company threatened, all because he had shown kindness to a stranger one Saturday night. "Margaret," Stella said, standing up with sudden determination, "I need to see Albert immediately, and I need you to prepare copies of everything in that folder. It's time to end this." Margaret nodded, her expression relieved. "I was hoping you'd say that. Mr. Lorenzo is in his office, and he's alone. Should I cancel his next appointment?" "Cancel all his appointments for the rest of the day," Stella said, clutching the folder of evidence against her chest. "We're going to fix this mess, starting right now." As Margaret left to clear Albert's schedule, Stella remained in her office, staring out at the city skyline and grappling with the magnitude of her miscalculation. She had thought she was protecting Albert from Dominic's attacks, but Albert hadn't needed protection from Dominic. He had needed protection from the consequences of Dominic's lies. Now she would have to find the courage to confess not only Dominic's crimes, but her own misguided attempt at justice. She would have to tell Albert that while he had been suffering in silence to protect her reputation, she had been waging a secret war based on incomplete information. The woman who walked toward Albert's office that morning was no longer the confident strategist who had spent weeks orchestrating Dominic Ashworth's downfall. She was someone humbled by the realization that intelligence without wisdom could be just as destructive as malice, and that the best intentions could lead to the worst outcomes when built on false assumptions. But she was also someone determined to make things right, no matter the cost to her own pride or position. Chapter 6. The Weight of Victory. The walk from Stella's office to Albert's felt like a journey toward her own judgment day. Each step echoed in the corridor, marking time until she would have to face the man she had inadvertently betrayed while trying to protect him. The folder of evidence felt like it carried the weight of her soul, each page a testament to her spectacular failure to understand the situation she had inserted herself into. She knocked on Albert's door with knuckles gone white from gripping the folder too tightly. When his voice called for her to enter, she pushed open the door to find him standing at his window, gazing out at the city with the posture of a man carrying an impossible burden. "Stella," he said without turning around, his voice carrying a weariness she had never heard before. "Margaret said you needed to see me urgently. Is everything all right with the Morrison campaign?" The question was so normal, so focused on work, that it made Stella's heart ache. Even in the midst of whatever crisis he was facing, Albert's first concern was ensuring that the company's projects were running smoothly. "Albert," she said, her voice barely steady, "we need to talk about Dominic Ashworth, and about the rumors, and about what's really been happening here." Albert turned from the window, and Stella was shocked by what she saw. His face was etched with exhaustion, his eyes shadowed with stress, and his usually immaculate appearance showed signs of sleepless nights and barely controlled anxiety. This was not the confident CEO she had been working with for the past month. This was a man under siege. Stella, you don't need to concern yourself with office gossip, Albert said, attempting to project his usual professional composure. I've handled situations like this before, and I'll handle this one too. Your focus should be on your excellent work, not on whatever rumors people are spreading. The kindness in his voice, even while he was clearly suffering, made Stella feel physically ill. She moved to his desk and placed the folder on its surface with shaking hands. Albert, please sit down. What I have to tell you is going to change everything you think you know about what's been happening here. Something in her tone must have convinced him of the seriousness of the situation, because he moved to his chair and sat down, his eyes fixed on her face with growing concern. I know about the board investigation, Stella said without preamble. I know that Dominic Ashworth has been spreading rumors about us, about my hiring, about our supposed relationship. And I know that you've been protecting me from the consequences while facing them yourself. Albert's expression didn't change, but she saw his hands tighten slightly on the arms of his chair. How did you find out about the investigation? Margaret overheard Dominic bragging about his success in manipulating the board. She brought me this. Stella opened the folder and spread the emails across Albert's desk. It's all here, Albert. Every lie, every manipulation, every step of Dominic's plan to destroy your reputation so he could force you into the Ashworth merger on his terms. Albert leaned forward and began reading the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. Stella watched him process the evidence of Dominic's betrayal, seeing the exact moment when the full scope of the manipulation became clear to him. My God, Albert whispered, his voice tight with controlled anger. He planned all of this. Every rumor, every insinuation, every concerned employee who approached the board. He looked up at Stella, his eyes filled with a mixture of fury and something that looked like relief. None of it was real. None of the concerns about favoritism or inappropriate conduct were genuine. None of it, Stella confirmed. Dominic needed a scandal to weaken your position, and our weekend encounter gave him the perfect foundation to build his lies on. He convinced Patricia to spread gossip, manipulated board members into believing there were ethical violations, and then sat back while you suffered the consequences. Albert stood abruptly and began pacing behind his desk, running his hands through his hair in agitation. I can't believe I didn't see it. I was so focused on protecting you from the fallout that I never questioned whether the rumors themselves were manufactured. That's because you're a good man, Stella said softly. Dominic was counting on your integrity to blind you to his lack of it. Albert stopped pacing and looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. How long have you known about this? The question she had been dreading hung in the air between them. Stella took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether Albert would ever be able to trust her again. I've known pieces of it for weeks, she admitted. I overheard Dominic and Patricia talking about the rumors early on, but I misunderstood what I was hearing. I thought you were somehow complicit in allowing the gossip to spread, that you were ashamed of our connection and unwilling to defend me properly. Albert's expression shifted to one of hurt surprise. You thought I was ashamed of you. I thought you were trying to distance yourself from me to protect the company's reputation, Stella said, her voice growing smaller with each word. I didn't realize you were actually fighting the board behind closed doors to defend me. I didn't know about the investigation or the personal cost you were paying. So what did you do? Albert asked, and there was something in his voice that suggested he already suspected the answer wouldn't be simple. Stella felt her courage failing her, but she forced herself to continue. I decided to protect you the only way I knew how. I went after Dominic. Albert's eyes widened. What do you mean, you went after Dominic? I mean, I destroyed him, Stella said, her voice barely above a whisper. I used everything I knew about marketing psychology and strategic manipulation to systematically dismantle his credibility, expose his financial problems, and sabotage the Ashworth merger. I leaked information about Ashworth Corp's instability to competitors and journalists. I created false personas to spread concerns about the merger on professional networks. I turned his own tactics against him and watched his reputation crumble. The silence that followed her confession was deafening. Albert stared at her with an expression of complete shock, as if he was seeing her for the first time. "You've been conducting a covert campaign against Dominic Ashworth for weeks." Albert's voice was carefully controlled, but Stella could hear the undercurrents of multiple emotions. "Yes," Stella admitted, "and it worked. Dominic's financial problems are now public knowledge. The Ashworth merger is falling apart, and his credibility in the business community is destroyed. I accomplished everything I set out to do." "Except," Albert said slowly, "you were fighting the wrong battle entirely." The words hit Stella like physical blows. "Except that," she agreed, tears beginning to blur her vision. "While I was playing strategic games and feeling satisfied about my clever revenge, you were facing real consequences for something that never happened. You were enduring an ethics investigation, dealing with threats to your career, and suffering in silence to protect me from a scandal I could have helped you fight if I had just asked the right questions." Albert sat back down heavily, his expression cycling through anger, hurt, and something that might have been admiration. "You single-handedly destroyed Dominic Ashworth's business empire to protect me from rumors that he created in the first place." "The irony isn't lost on me," Stella said bitterly. "I was so focused on being the brilliant strategist that I never stopped to consider that my information might be incomplete. I let my emotions and my pride drive me to do something that was completely unnecessary." "Not completely unnecessary," Albert said quietly. "Dominic was manipulating the board and threatening the company. He deserved to face consequences for his actions. But those consequences came at the wrong time and for the wrong reasons," Stella replied. "I was trying to save you from him when what you actually needed was proof that his accusations were false. Instead of helping you fight the lies, I went to war against the liar." Albert was quiet for a long moment, studying the emails spread across his desk. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than accusatory. "What you did was wrong, Stella. Not because Dominic didn't deserve it, but because you made a unilateral decision about a situation you didn't fully understand. You let your assumptions guide your actions instead of seeking the truth." "I know," Stella whispered, the weight of her guilt crushing her. "I was so angry about the injustice of it all that I lost sight of what actually needed to be done." "But," Albert continued, and there was something different in his voice now, "what you accomplished was extraordinary. The research, the strategy, the execution. It was brilliant and devastating. You dismantled a corrupt businessman and saved this company from a predatory merger, even if that wasn't your intention." Stella looked up at him in surprise. "Are you saying you're not angry?" Albert's laugh was humorless. "Oh, I'm angry. I'm furious that you didn't trust me enough to come to me with your concerns. I'm hurt that you thought I would abandon you to protect my own reputation. And I'm frustrated that you took such enormous risks without considering the potential consequences." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "But I'm also amazed by what you accomplished. The woman who could orchestrate Dominic's downfall with such precision and creativity is exactly the kind of person I want on my team. The question is whether you want to be here, now that you know the truth about everything." Stella felt her heart racing as she processed his words. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the board investigation will end as soon as they see this evidence of Dominic's manipulation. My reputation will be restored, the Ashworth merger will be cancelled, and Lorenzo Enterprises will emerge stronger than before. But you'll have to live with the knowledge that your brilliant revenge was based on a fundamental misunderstanding of who needed protecting from whom. Albert leaned forward, his eyes intense and searching. The question is whether you can forgive yourself for that mistake, and whether we can find a way to work together, knowing what we now know about each other's capabilities and intentions. Stella met his gaze, seeing not just the professional consequences of her actions, but the personal ones as well. She had revealed herself to be someone capable of both extraordinary loyalty and devastating deception. The man sitting across from her now knew exactly how dangerous she could be when motivated by the wrong assumptions. But he was also offering her a chance at redemption, an opportunity to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of complete honesty rather than hidden agendas and mistaken assumptions. "I want to make this right," Stella said finally. "All of it. I want to help you present this evidence to the board, and I want to find a way to earn back your trust." Albert nodded slowly. "Then that's where we'll start. With the truth, and with the understanding that we both have a lot to learn about trusting each other with the whole story." As they began planning their presentation to the board, Stella felt the weight of her perfect victory settling around her like chains. She had won a war that should never have been fought, against an enemy who deserved to lose, for reasons that had never existed. Now she would have to learn to live with the consequences of being exactly as brilliant and dangerous as she had always known herself to be. Chapter 7. Redemption and Truth. The week that followed Stella's confession became a crucible that would either forge a new understanding between her and Albert or destroy any possibility of a future together. She threw herself into the work of redemption with the same intensity she had once applied to revenge, but now her motivation was pure. She wanted to save Albert from the consequences of her misguided actions. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday morning, giving them 5 days to prepare a comprehensive presentation that would not only clear Albert's name, but expose Dominic Ashworth's manipulation completely. Stella worked 18-hour days, compiling evidence, cross-referencing documents, and building an airtight case that would leave no room for doubt about Dominic's guilt or Albert's innocence. But even as she worked to undo the damage Dominic had caused, Stella couldn't ignore the other damage she had inflicted. The Ashworth merger was indeed collapsing, but the financial fallout was affecting innocent employees at Ashworth Corp. Who had nothing to do with Dominic's schemes. The competitors who had benefited from her leaked information were now circling Ashworth Corp like vultures, and the company's stock price had plummeted to the point where a bankruptcy filing seemed inevitable. "I've destroyed more than just Dominic," Stella confided to Albert on Wednesday evening as they worked late in his office. "There are hundreds of employees at Ashworth Corp. Who are going to lose their jobs because of what I did." Albert looked up from the legal documents he was reviewing, his expression thoughtful. "That's not entirely your fault, Stella. Dominic's gambling debts and financial mismanagement would have brought down Ashworth Corp. eventually. You just accelerated the timeline." "But I accelerated it for the wrong reasons," Stella replied bitterly. "I was so focused on punishing Dominic that I didn't consider the collateral damage. Those employees don't deserve to suffer because their CEO is a manipulative criminal." Albert set down his pen and studied her face. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that if I'm capable of destroying a company, I should be capable of saving one too," Stella said, her voice gaining strength as the idea took shape. "What if we could find a way to acquire Ashworth Corp's assets and absorb their employees? We could preserve the jobs while eliminating Dominic from the equation entirely." "A hostile takeover?" Albert asked, raising an eyebrow. "That would be expensive and complicated, especially given the current scrutiny around our business practices." "Not hostile," Stella corrected. "Strategic. We present it as Lorenzo Enterprises, stepping in to save Ashworth Corp. from bankruptcy and protect the jobs of innocent employees. The optics would be perfect. Instead of looking like we're taking advantage of a competitor's misfortune, we'd be positioned as the company that values people over profit. Albert's expression shifted from skeptical to intrigued. You want to turn your revenge into a rescue mission. I want to turn my mistake into an opportunity to do something right, Stella said firmly. I caused this situation, and I want to fix it properly. Not just for us, but for everyone who got caught in the crossfire. The next 2 days became a whirlwind of financial analysis, legal consultation, and strategic planning. Stella worked with Albert to develop a comprehensive acquisition proposal that would absorb Ashworth Corp's assets while preserving employment for their workforce. The plan was ambitious and complex, requiring careful coordination with banks, lawyers, and regulatory agencies. But as they worked together, something shifted in the dynamic between them. The professional respect that had always existed between them deepened into something more personal. Albert began to see not just Stella's brilliant strategic mind, but her capacity for taking responsibility and making things right. Stella, in turn, witnessed Albert's genuine concern for people affected by corporate decisions, his commitment to ethical business practices, and his ability to find opportunity in crisis. On Thursday night, as they finalized their presentation for the board meeting, Stella found herself alone with Albert in his office after everyone else had gone home. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, and the intimate atmosphere made it impossible to maintain purely professional boundaries. Albert, she said quietly, I need to tell you something before tomorrow's meeting. He looked up from his laptop, his expression expectant. I need you to know that everything I did was motivated by my feelings for you, Stella continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Not just respect or gratitude, but something deeper. I was falling in love with you, and the thought of Dominic destroying your reputation made me lose all sense of perspective. Albert's expression grew very still. Stella, I'm not telling you this to complicate things, she said quickly. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that my actions, however misguided, came from a place of caring about you. I couldn't bear the thought of watching you suffer for something that wasn't your fault. Albert stood up slowly and walked around his desk to where she was sitting. When he reached her, he extended his hand to help her to her feet. Do you know what I've been thinking about this week? He asked, his voice soft but intense. I've been thinking about how you were willing to wage war against one of the most powerful men in the city to protect someone you barely knew. I've been thinking about how you took responsibility for your mistakes and immediately began working to fix them. And I've been thinking about how incredibly lucky I am to have someone like you in my life. Stella's heart began racing as she processed his words. What are you saying? I'm saying that I've been falling in love with you too, Albert replied, his hands coming up to frame her face gently. From the moment I saw you in that conference room, trying to maintain your professional composure while your world was turning upside down. You were magnificent then, and you're even more magnificent now. Even after everything I've done, Stella asked, her voice barely a whisper. Especially after everything you've done, Albert said firmly. The woman who could orchestrate Dominic's downfall with such precision and then immediately begin working to save innocent people from the consequences is exactly the kind of person I want to spend my life with. When Albert kissed her, it was with a passion that had been building for weeks beneath their professional interactions. Stella felt herself melting into his embrace, finally allowing herself to acknowledge the depth of her feelings for this man who had shown her kindness when she was vulnerable and forgiveness when she was wrong. They broke apart breathlessly, both knowing that they had crossed a line that would change everything between them. What happens now? Stella asked, her forehead resting against his. Now we go into that board meeting tomorrow and we tell them the truth, Albert said, his voice filled with determination. All of it. Dominic's manipulation, your revenge, The Ashworth acquisition proposal, and the fact that despite everything that's happened, I trust you more than anyone else in this company. And after the meeting? Stella asked. Albert's smile was warm and full of promise. After the meeting, we start building something together, something based on complete honesty and mutual respect, something that can withstand whatever challenges come our way. Friday morning arrived with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The boardroom was packed with Lorenzo Enterprises directors, legal counsel, and independent investigators who had been conducting the ethics review. Stella sat beside Albert at the head of the table, the comprehensive presentation they had prepared spread out before them. "Ladies and gentlemen," Albert began, his voice steady and confident, "we're here to address the allegations that have been raised about my conduct and the hiring of our senior marketing director, Stella Morris. What you're about to hear will shock you, but it will also demonstrate the importance of seeking truth rather than accepting assumptions." For the next 2 hours, Albert and Stella presented their case with methodical precision. They showed the board Dominic's emails detailing his manipulation campaign. They provided evidence of his financial crimes and securities fraud. They documented the timeline that proved Albert had selected Stella for her position based purely on professional merit, weeks before they had ever met personally. But most importantly, they revealed Stella's revenge campaign in its entirety, holding nothing back about her methods or motivations. "I want to be completely transparent with this board," Stella said as she concluded her portion of the presentation. "I took actions that were ethically questionable and professionally risky. I allowed my personal feelings to cloud my judgment, and I made decisions based on incomplete information. I take full responsibility for those choices." The room was silent as the board members absorbed the full scope of what they had heard. Finally, the board chairman spoke. "Mr. Lorenzo, Miss Morris, this is certainly the most unusual ethics investigation I've ever been involved in. We'll need time to review all this evidence and consider the implications. But I want to say that your transparency and willingness to accept responsibility is commendable." After the board members filed out, Stella and Albert found themselves alone in the conference room, emotionally exhausted, but relieved to have finally told the complete truth. "Whatever happens, we did the right thing," Albert said, taking her hand in his. "We did," Stella agreed, "and whatever consequences come from this, we'll face them together." As they began packing up their presentation materials, both of them understood that they had not only survived the crisis Dominic had created, they had emerged from it stronger, more honest, and more committed to each other than ever before. The revenge was complete, but more importantly, the redemption had begun. Chapter 8: Forgiveness and Fire. The aftermath of the board meeting created a strange suspended reality where Stella and Albert existed in limbo, waiting for the directors to render their verdict while trying to navigate the new emotional landscape they had created for themselves. The board had taken the weekend to deliberate, leaving both of them to wrestle with the implications of their confessions, both professional and personal. Monday morning brought an unexpected development. Instead of a decision from the board, they received news that Benjamin Wellington had disappeared. His lawyer reported that Benjamin had liquidated his personal assets over the weekend and left the country, apparently fleeing to avoid the criminal charges that were inevitably coming his way. Wellington Corp had officially filed for bankruptcy, leaving hundreds of employees facing unemployment. "He's gone," Albert said, looking up from the legal documents that had been delivered to his office. "Benjamin liquidated everything he could and ran." Stella felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and hollow victory. "So my revenge is complete. Benjamin lost everything and destroyed himself in the process." "Is that how you feel about it?" Albert asked, studying her expression carefully. "Satisfied?" "I should feel satisfied," Stella replied, sinking into the chair across from his desk. Benjamin got exactly what he deserved, but instead I just feel empty. Like I won a game that wasn't worth playing. Albert nodded slowly. That's because revenge is never as fulfilling as people expect it to be. Justice might bring peace, but revenge usually just leaves you questioning whether the cost was worth it. Their conversation was interrupted by Margaret's arrival with more urgent news. Mr. Lorenzo, the board chairman is here to see you and Miss Morris. He said it's important. Within minutes, they were sitting across from Chairman Williams, a distinguished man in his 70s who had guided Lorenzo Enterprises through multiple decades of growth and challenge. After extensive deliberation, Chairman Williams began, the board has reached several conclusions. First, the ethics charges against you, Albert, are dismissed entirely. The evidence of Benjamin Wellington's manipulation is overwhelming, and it's clear that no impropriety occurred in Miss Morris's hiring or in your subsequent professional relationship. Relief flooded through both of them, but Chairman Williams wasn't finished. However, he continued, the board has serious concerns about the vigilante actions taken by Miss Morris. While we understand her motivations, we cannot overlook the fact that she conducted unauthorized intelligence gathering and engaged in what amounts to corporate sabotage, regardless of the target's guilt. Stella's heart sank as she realized the board's dilemma. She had saved Albert's reputation, but potentially destroyed her own career in the process. That said, Chairman Williams added, Miss Morris's actions also prevented Lorenzo Enterprises from entering into what would have been a disastrous merger with a criminally compromised company. Her intelligence gathering, while ethically questionable, may have saved us millions of dollars and protected our shareholders from significant losses. Albert leaned forward. What is the board's decision regarding Miss Morris's employment? The board has decided to issue a formal reprimand to Miss Morris for her unauthorized actions, but we will not terminate her employment. However, we are requiring that she undergo ethics training and that her future activities be subject to additional oversight. Chairman Williams looked directly at Stella. We believe that someone with your strategic capabilities can be an enormous asset to this company, provided you learn to channel those capabilities through proper channels. After Chairman Williams left, Stella and Albert found themselves alone again, processing the mixed victory they had achieved. A reprimand and ethics training, Stella said with a wry smile. I suppose that's better than unemployment and criminal charges. You're not happy, Albert observed, noting the tension in her voice. I should be grateful, Stella replied. But I can't shake the feeling that this entire situation has revealed something about me that I don't like. I'm capable of things I never thought I'd do, and I'm not sure how to reconcile that with who I thought I was. Albert stood up and moved to the window, his back to her as he spoke. That's what I've been struggling with too. Not who you are, but what it means for us. The words hung in the air between them, carrying implications that neither had fully addressed since their kiss on Friday night. What do you mean? Stella asked, though she suspected she already knew. Albert turned to face her, his expression conflicted. I mean that I've fallen in love with someone who is capable of systematically destroying another person's life when she believes it's justified. Someone who can lie, manipulate, and wage psychological warfare with frightening effectiveness. And that scares you, Stella said quietly. It terrifies me, Albert admitted. Not because I think you'd ever hurt me, but because I've never been involved with someone who has that kind of power. The woman I'm in love with could ruin me completely if she ever decided I deserved it. Stella felt as if he had slapped her. Is that really what you think of me? That I'm some kind of threat to you? I think you're the most dangerous person I've ever met, Albert said, his voice intense. And I think I'm more attracted to you because of it, not despite it. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised her. They stared at each other across the office, the air crackling with tension that was part fear, part desire and part recognition of something neither had expected to find. I don't know how to have a relationship with someone when I can't predict what they're capable of, Albert continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. And I don't know how to be with someone when I've shown them the worst parts of myself, Stella replied. Someone who's seen me be vindictive and manipulative and ruthless. But you were all of those things to protect me, Albert said, taking a step closer to her. You were willing to become someone you didn't like in order to save someone you cared about. That's not the worst part of yourself, Stella. That's the most extraordinary part. The space between them seemed to be shrinking without either of them consciously moving. Stella could feel the heat radiating from Albert's body, could see the conflict and desire warring in his expression. I don't know if I can trust myself with you, she whispered. I don't know if I can trust myself not to make the same kinds of mistakes if I think you're being threatened. And I don't know if I can handle being with someone who makes me feel completely out of control, Albert replied, his hands coming up to frame her face. Someone who makes me want to throw away every professional boundary I've ever maintained. This is insane, Stella breathed, but she didn't pull away from his touch. Completely insane, Albert agreed, and then he was kissing her with a desperation that spoke of weeks of suppressed desire and emotional turmoil. This kiss was nothing like their gentle first kiss on Friday night. This was fire and need, and the acknowledgement that whatever existed between them was too powerful to be contained by rational thought or professional boundaries. Stella felt herself responding with equal intensity, her hands fisting in Albert's shirt as she pulled him closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard and staring at each other with a mixture of desire and uncertainty. We can't do this here, Albert said, his voice rough with barely controlled passion. We shouldn't do this anywhere, Stella replied, but her words lacked conviction. Probably not, Albert agreed, but I don't think that's going to stop us. What are we doing, Albert? Stella asked, her voice vulnerable in a way it rarely was. I think we're falling in love with each other despite every rational reason why we shouldn't, Albert replied. I think we're discovering that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is also the most necessary. And if this destroys us both? Stella asked. Albert's smile was both tender and fierce. Then at least we'll have destroyed each other honestly. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of stolen glances and carefully maintained professional facades. But beneath the surface, both of them were acutely aware of the shift that had occurred between them. They had moved beyond the realm of professional attraction into something far more complex and potentially devastating. When the workday finally ended, Albert found Stella in her office, packing up her briefcase with movements that were too controlled to be natural. Have dinner with me, he said without preamble. Albert, I don't think— Not at a restaurant, he interrupted. At my place, where we can talk honestly without worrying about who might be watching or listening. Stella looked up at him, seeing the invitation for what it really was, a chance to explore what existed between them, away from the complications of their professional lives. Are you sure that's wise? She asked. Nothing about this is wise, Albert replied, but I think we're past the point of making decisions based on wisdom. An hour later, Stella found herself standing in Albert's penthouse kitchen, watching him prepare dinner with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else. The domestic intimacy of the moment was almost overwhelming after the emotional intensity of the day. This feels surreal, she said, accepting the glass of wine he offered her. Which part? Albert asked. The fact that we're having dinner in the same place where this all started, or the fact that we're both pretending this is just a casual meal between colleagues? The fact that a month ago I woke up in your bed as a stranger, and now I'm standing in your kitchen as someone you're afraid to trust, but can't seem to resist, Stella replied. Albert's laugh was short and humorless. When you put it like that, it sounds like the premise for a psychological thriller. Maybe it is, Stella said softly. Maybe we're both too damaged and too dangerous for this to work. Albert set down his wine glass and moved to stand directly in front of her. Or maybe we're exactly what each other needs, someone who understands that love isn't always safe or simple or predictable. Is that what this is? Stella asked, her heart racing. Love? I think it's the beginning of love, Albert replied, his hands coming up to cup her face gently. Complicated, terrifying, impossible love that's going to challenge everything we think we know about ourselves. When he kissed her this time, it was with the recognition that they were both choosing to step into unknown territory together, despite the risks and uncertainties that lay ahead. As the city lights twinkled beyond the windows of Albert's penthouse, both of them understood that they had moved irrevocably beyond the point of no return. Chapter 9. Building Together. 3 weeks had passed since Albert and Stella's evening in his penthouse, and their relationship had evolved into something that defied easy categorization. Professionally, they maintained perfect boundaries, focused, strategic, and increasingly effective as partners. Personally, they had begun exploring the complex emotional territory between them with the same intensity they brought to everything else. The Lorenzo Enterprises acquisition of Wellington Corp's assets was proceeding smoothly, with over 400 former Wellington employees being absorbed into Lorenzo's expanded operations. The business community had praised Albert's handling of the situation, positioning him as a leader who put people before profit margins. Stella's role in both creating and resolving the crisis remained their shared secret, known only to the board and a few trusted advisors. But Benjamin Wellington, it seemed, was not finished with them. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when Margaret rushed into Albert's office with an expression of barely controlled panic. "Mr. Lorenzo, you need to see this immediately," she said, thrusting a tablet toward him. "It just went live on every major financial news site." Albert's face went pale as he read the headline. Corporate espionage scandal rocks. Lorenzo Enterprises leaked documents reveal systematic sabotage campaign. Stella, who had been reviewing marketing projections at Albert's conference table, moved quickly to look over his shoulder. What they saw made her blood run cold. The article contained detailed information about her revenge campaign against Benjamin, but with a crucial twist. The leaked documents painted her actions not as misguided personal vengeance, but as a calculated corporate espionage operation authorized by Albert himself. Email exchanges had been fabricated showing Albert directing Stella to neutralize the Wellington threat by any means necessary. Financial records had been doctored to suggest that Lorenzo Enterprises had paid Stella bonuses for her special projects. "This is impossible," Stella breathed. "These documents are completely fabricated." "Not completely," Albert said grimly, scrolling through the leaked materials. "Some of these are real documents from your investigation, but they've been altered and presented completely out of context. Someone with access to our internal systems created this." Margaret's voice was tight with worry. "The SEC has already announced they're opening an investigation into corporate espionage allegations. 3 major clients have called to express concerns about continuing their contracts with us." Albert stood abruptly, his expression shifting into the focused intensity that Stella had learned to recognize as his crisis management mode. "Margaret, cancel all my appointments for the day. Get our legal team on the phone immediately and schedule an emergency board meeting for this afternoon." After Margaret left, Albert turned to Stella with an expression that was equal parts fury and determination. Benjamin may have fled the country, but he clearly left behind a carefully planned final attack. This has his fingerprints all over it. "How?" Stella asked, her mind racing through the implications. "Benjamin didn't have access to our internal systems." "No, but he's had weeks to plan this while we thought he was in hiding. He must have recruited someone inside the company, someone with access to confidential documents. Albert moved to his computer and began pulling up employee access records. Someone who could doctor real documents and plant them in our systems. Stella felt a familiar surge of strategic thinking, but this time it was tempered by the lessons she had learned about acting on incomplete information. Albert, before we start investigating our own employees, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Can I see all the leaked documents? For the next 2 hours, they analyzed every piece of fabricated evidence with the systematic thoroughness of forensic investigators. Stella's experience in information manipulation allowed her to identify exactly how the documents had been altered, while Albert's knowledge of the company's systems helped them trace the digital fingerprints left behind. "Here," Stella said, pointing to metadata in one of the fabricated emails. "This document was created last week, but it's dated 3 months ago. Whoever did this was skilled, but not skilled enough to completely hide the evidence of manipulation." Albert nodded, highlighting another inconsistency. "And this financial record shows authorization codes that didn't exist until after Benjamin had already left the company. The forger made mistakes. The question is whether we can prove the forgery before the damage becomes irreversible," Stella said. "The financial markets have already started reacting. Our stock price dropped 12% in the last 2 hours." Albert's expression was grim but determined. "Then we don't have time for a lengthy investigation. We need to identify the inside source and expose this as fabrication before the SEC investigation gains momentum." Stella stood up and began pacing, her mind working through possibilities with the speed and precision that had made her such a formidable strategist. "Albert, I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." "Tell me." "What if we use Benjamin's own tactics against him? We know this is a setup, and we know someone inside the company is helping him. Instead of trying to prove our innocence through traditional means, what if we trap the insider into revealing themselves?" Albert's expression grew wary. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we give the insider false information and see how it gets used," Stella said, her voice gaining confidence as the plan took shape. "We create a fake document that appears to contain damaging information about our response to this crisis, but actually contains subtle markers that would identify anyone who leaks it." "You want to set a trap using fabricated evidence," Albert said slowly. "That sounds remarkably similar to what got us into this mess in the first place." Stella stopped pacing and faced him directly. "The difference is that this time we're doing it together, with full knowledge of the risks and implications. And we're not acting on assumptions. We know for certain that someone is working against us." Albert was quiet for a long moment, considering the proposal. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to trust me," Stella said simply. "And I need you to help me create something that looks authentic enough to fool whoever is feeding information to Benjamin." They spent the afternoon crafting their trap with the meticulous care of master strategists. The document they created appeared to be Albert's private strategy memo for responding to the espionage allegations, complete with plans to eliminate evidence and neutralize witnesses. In reality, the document contained hidden digital markers and fictional details that would immediately identify anyone who leaked it. Albert distributed the fake memo to a carefully selected group of senior employees, each receiving a slightly different version with unique identifying markers. If any version was leaked, they would know exactly who was responsible. "Now we wait," Stella said as they finished implementing their plan. "How long do you think it will take?" Albert asked. "If our insider is working with Benjamin, probably less than 24 hours. Whoever is doing this is motivated by urgency. They want to destroy us before we can mount an effective defense." That evening, Stella found herself back in Albert's penthouse, But this time, the atmosphere was charged with strategic energy rather than romantic tension. They had ordered takeout and spread their computers and documents across his dining table, creating a war room overlooking the city lights. "I keep thinking about what you said earlier," Albert said as they reviewed the latest news coverage of the scandal. "About us doing this together instead of making unilateral decisions." "What about it?" Stella asked, not looking up from her laptop. "I realized that this is the first crisis we've faced where we're completely honest with each other from the beginning. No hidden agendas, no misunderstandings about motivations or intentions." Stella did look up then, seeing something in Albert's expression that made her heart skip. "And how does that feel?" "Like we're unstoppable," Albert replied, his voice carrying a conviction that sent shivers down her spine. "Like we can handle anything as long as we're facing it together." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond their current crisis. Stella felt something shifting inside her, a recognition that what existed between them had evolved into something deeper than attraction or even love. They had become true partners, capable of facing any challenge as long as they faced it together. Their moment of emotional connection was interrupted by Albert's phone buzzing with an urgent message. "It worked," he said, reading the notification with a mixture of satisfaction and anger. "Our fake memo was just posted on the same financial blog that published the original leak. And the version that was leaked has Patricia's unique identifier." "Patricia from accounting," Stella said grimly. "The same Patricia who helped Benjamin spread the original rumors about us." "She's been working with him all along," Albert confirmed, "which means we now have proof that this entire scandal is fabricated, and we have evidence of who's responsible for the internal security breach." They worked through the night, preparing a comprehensive response that would not only clear their names, but expose the full scope of Benjamin's final assault on Lorenzo Enterprises. By dawn, they had assembled irrefutable evidence of the document fabrication, the insider collaboration, and Benjamin's ongoing campaign of corporate sabotage. The emergency board meeting that morning was unlike anything in Lorenzo Enterprises' history. Albert and Stella presented their case with the precision of seasoned prosecutors, laying out the evidence of Benjamin's manipulation with devastating clarity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Albert concluded, "what we're dealing with is not a corporate espionage scandal, but a sophisticated character assassination attempt by a man who fled the country to avoid criminal prosecution. Miss Morris and I have not only exposed this fabrication, but we've identified and documented the internal security breach that made it possible." Chairman Williams looked around the table at his fellow board members before speaking. "Mr. Lorenzo, Miss Morris, this presentation has been extraordinary. The evidence you've compiled is comprehensive and compelling. I believe I speak for the entire board when I say that we have complete confidence in your integrity and your leadership." After the board members filed out, Albert and Stella found themselves alone in the conference room, emotionally drained but victorious. "We did it," Stella said softly. "We actually did it." "We did," Albert agreed, then turned to face her with an expression of profound gratitude and something deeper. "Stella, I want you to know that what we accomplished here goes far beyond clearing our names or saving the company." "What do you mean?" Albert moved closer to her, his hands coming up to frame her face gently. "I mean that we've proven that we can be partners in every sense of the word, professional partners, strategic partners, and—" He paused, searching for the right words. "And personal partners," Stella finished softly. "I want to offer you something," Albert said, his voice carrying a weight that suggested this was a moment that would define their future. "I want to offer you a full partnership in Lorenzo Enterprises, not just as an employee or even as a senior executive, but as an equal partner with shared ownership and decision-making authority." Stella's breath caught. "Albert, that's—" That's recognition of what you've already become, Albert continued. You've saved this company twice now, once from Benjamin's predatory merger, and once from his final attack. You've proven that you're not just brilliant at marketing, but brilliant at strategy, crisis management, and leadership. And personally, Stella asked, her heart racing. Albert's smile was warm and full of promise. Personally, I'm asking you to be my partner in building something extraordinary, an empire based on mutual respect, shared power, and the kind of love that makes both people stronger. As Stella looked into Albert's eyes, she realized that this was the moment she had been unconsciously working toward since that first morning in his penthouse. Not just professional success or personal happiness, but the opportunity to build something meaningful with someone who valued her strength rather than being threatened by it. Yes, she said simply, yes to all of it. When Albert kissed her this time, it was with the joy of two people who had found their perfect match, not despite their complexities and capabilities, but because of them. Chapter 10, Empire of Love. 6 months later, Lorenzo Enterprises had not only recovered from the Benjamin Wellington scandal, but had emerged as the most influential and respected company in the industry. Under the joint leadership of Albert Lorenzo and Stella Morris, now officially listed as co-CEO and partner, the company had expanded into 3 new markets, acquired 2 major competitors, and been featured on the cover of Forbes as the power partnership that's reshaping corporate America. But tonight, as Stella stood in the mirror of Albert's penthouse bedroom, their bedroom now, adjusting her stunning emerald green gown, her mind wasn't on corporate achievements. Tonight was the company's annual celebration, marking not just another successful year, but the public celebration of the partnership that had transformed both their lives and their business. "You look breathtaking," Albert said from the doorway, his voice carrying the same wonder and desire that had been present since their first honest conversation months ago. Stella turned to face him, her breath catching as it always did when she saw him in formal attire. Albert wore his tuxedo like he wore everything else, with natural elegance and quiet confidence that made her heart race even after all this time. "We clean up well for a couple of corporate warriors," she said with a smile that held both love and mischief. Albert crossed the room to stand behind her, his hands settling on her waist as they both looked at their reflection in the mirror. "Do you ever think about how different things would have been if I hadn't brought you here that first night?" "Never," Stella said firmly, leaning back against his chest. "Because I believe we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are inevitable. Even if one of those connections involves systematic corporate sabotage," Albert asked with the dry humor that had become one of her favorite things about him. "Especially then," Stella replied, turning in his arms to face him. "Anyone can fall in love during easy times. It takes something special to fall in love while committing strategic warfare against mutual enemies." Albert's laugh was rich and genuine. "Only you would consider corporate espionage a romantic bonding experience." "Only you would fall in love with someone capable of corporate espionage," Stella countered, reaching up to adjust his bow tie with unnecessary attention to detail. "Stella," Albert said softly, his hands coming up to still her fidgeting fingers. "Before we go downstairs to the celebration, there's something I want to ask you." Something in his tone made her look up sharply, and she was surprised to see nervousness in his expression, an emotion she rarely witnessed in Albert Lorenzo. "What is it?" she asked. Instead of answering immediately, Albert reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Stella's heart stopped beating as he dropped to one knee in their bedroom, the same room where their journey had begun in confusion and embarrassment. "Stella Morris," Albert said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "6 months ago, you woke up in my bed as a stranger who would change my life forever. You've been my partner in crisis, my equal in strategy, and my match in every way that matters. Stella felt tears beginning to gather in her eyes as Albert opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and bold, exactly like their relationship. You've shown me that true partnership means supporting each other's strength, not diminishing it. You've proven that love can be powerful and passionate and still be built on complete trust and respect. Albert's voice grew stronger with each word. I don't want to just be your business partner or your lover. I want to be your husband, your equal, and your ally in building an empire that belongs to both of us. Stella was crying now, tears of joy streaming down her face as she processed the perfect symmetry of this moment. Albert, will you marry me, Stella Morris? Will you be my wife and my partner in creating something extraordinary together? Yes, Stella whispered, then said it louder with all the conviction in her heart. Yes, absolutely, yes. Albert slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook slightly with emotion, then stood to capture her lips in a kiss that was passionate enough to make them both forget they had a party to attend. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard and slightly disheveled, Stella looked down at the ring sparkling on her finger and felt a completion she hadn't known she was missing. How long have you been planning this? She asked. Since the moment you confessed to your revenge campaign, Albert admitted with a sheepish smile. I realized that any woman who would wage war to protect someone she loved was someone I wanted to spend my life with. Even though I nearly destroyed everything we've built, Stella asked. Especially because of that, Albert said firmly. You taught me that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is also the most necessary. Loving you has been dangerous from the beginning, and it's been the best decision I've ever made. An hour later, they entered the ballroom of the city's most exclusive hotel, where 300 guests, employees, clients, business leaders, and friends had gathered to celebrate Lorenzo Enterprises' unprecedented success. The room was decorated in gold and black, with dramatic lighting that made everything look like a scene from a movie. But as they made their way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and exchanging pleasantries, Stella was acutely aware that this wasn't just a corporate celebration. This was a declaration of victory over everyone who had doubted them, questioned their partnership, or tried to destroy what they had built together. Ladies and gentlemen, Albert said when they reached the stage, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate not just another successful year, but the partnerships that make extraordinary achievements possible. The crowd quieted, sensing that something significant was about to happen. 6 months ago, Lorenzo Enterprises faced the greatest crisis in its history, Albert continued. We were attacked by people who thought they could destroy us through lies, manipulation, and betrayal. But what our enemies didn't understand is that partnerships built on mutual respect and shared strength are impossible to break. Stella watched the faces in the crowd, seeing employees who had weathered the storm with them, clients who had stood by them during the scandal, and competitors who now viewed Lorenzo Enterprises with a mixture of respect and wariness. Tonight, I want to publicly acknowledge the woman who has not only been my business partner, but who has shown me what it means to find your perfect match in every sense of the word. Albert turned to Stella, his expression filled with love and pride. Stella Morris didn't just save our company, she transformed it. Under our joint leadership, we've achieved things that neither of us could have accomplished alone. The applause was thunderous, but Albert raised his hand for silence. But more than that, he continued, his voice carrying a warmth that made several people in the audience smile knowingly. Stella has shown me that the best partnerships are built on truth, trust, and the willingness to fight for each other, no matter what challenges arise. Albert reached for Stella's hand, lifting it so that the diamond ring caught the light and sparkled visibly. Which is why I asked her to marry me tonight, and why I'm thrilled to announce that she said yes." The ballroom erupted in cheers and applause as Albert pulled Stella into his arms for a kiss that was both tender and triumphant. When they separated, Stella stepped forward to the microphone. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "When I joined Lorenzo Enterprises, I thought I was just starting a new job. I had no idea I was beginning the greatest adventure of my life." She looked out at the sea of faces, some friendly, some curious, all attentive. "Albert and I have learned that true partnership isn't about one person being stronger than the other. It's about two people making each other stronger. We've faced challenges that could have destroyed us, made mistakes that could have ruined us, and overcome obstacles that seemed impossible." Stella's voice grew stronger and more passionate as she spoke. "But we've also discovered that when two people are completely honest with each other, completely committed to each other's success, and completely willing to fight for what they've built together, there's nothing they can't accomplish." She turned to look at Albert, her eyes shining with love and determination. "Albert Lorenzo is not just my fiancé and my business partner. He's my equal, my match, and my ally in building something that will last forever. Together, we're not just running a company. We're creating an empire built on love, respect, and the belief that the most powerful thing in the world is two people who make each other stronger." The applause that followed was deafening, but Stella barely heard it. All her attention was focused on Albert, whose expression told her everything she needed to know about their future together. As the evening continued around them, with dancing, toasts, and celebrations that would be talked about for years, Stella and Albert found themselves on the hotel's terrace, looking out at the city lights that sparkled like promises of everything they would build together. "Any regrets?" Albert asked, his arms around her as they swayed gently to the music drifting from the ballroom. "About which part?" Stella asked with a laugh. "The corporate espionage, the systematic destruction of your business rival, or agreeing to marry you?" "Any of it. All of it." Stella was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "No regrets," she said finally. "Every mistake, every crisis, every moment of doubt led us to this. I wouldn't change anything because changing anything might have meant we never found each other." "Even the part where you woke up in my bed as a complete stranger?" Albert asked. "Especially that part," Stella said, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "That's where our empire began. With a woman who needed rescuing and a man who was kind enough to help her, even though he had no idea she would end up conquering his entire world." "I think we conquered each other's worlds," Albert corrected gently. "Even better," Stella agreed. As they danced under the stars, surrounded by the evidence of their success and the promise of their future, both Stella and Albert understood that they had created something rare and precious, a partnership built on equal strength, mutual respect, and a love powerful enough to transform not just their lives, but everything they touched. Their empire of love was just beginning, and together they were unstoppable. The woman who had once woken up in a stranger's bed as an embarrassed accident had become the queen of her own destiny, ruling alongside the man who had shown her that true power was meant to be shared. And as the city sparkled below them like a kingdom waiting to be claimed, Stella Morris and Albert Lorenzo began planning the next chapter of their extraordinary love story. Some empires are built on conquest. Others are built on love. Theirs would be built on both.